Did everyone get their materials? You know what we're voting on and what we're talking. Great. Great.
And we're live.
Okay, great. All right. I want to welcome everyone. How are you doing this today? I want to welcome you to the
get their materials.
Oh, hold on. I accidentally had myself live streaming at the same time. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you today. Welcome you to our task force for crime classification and penalties. I'm Senator Mary Washington. I'm the chair of the committee. We're going to go through, if you don't mind, Jamie, if you just read through our agenda, but we're going to do a quick summary of our meeting. Then we're going to look and make sure that we just have some short discussion. We're going to do our recommendations and then take a vote on our letters and those recommendations. So at first, I will start with the summary. Our last meeting, David Jaros, he's a professor of law and University of Baltimore School of Social Work. He provided some of our research about the background on crime classifications and penalties in the state of Maryland. Specifically, he pointed to misdemeanor assault, looking at how highly punitive it is, and he suggested that we might look at some legislation to make it a little more clear and not general about the penalties and the classification there, and better indicate what a felony is versus a misdemeanor. We also had a presentation from Tara Huffman, director of the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Program at OSI Baltimore. She's also one of the co-chairs and leaders of the People's Commission to Decriminalize Maryland. We invited them to talk about their efforts and discuss how the criminal code is impacting specific communities, homeless, how we are criminalizing poverty, and suggesting legislation about how we might reflect and continue to decriminalize and reduce the interactions with the public, with law enforcement in the context of juvenile and a criminal justice reform. We had a general consensus of the task force that we should do a couple of things. So we talked about extending the task force itself, that we indeed believe that we could create a standardized classification system for crimes and penalties in Maryland, that we should absolutely talk about default mens rea, and looking at whether or not we look at different elements of crime, discussing whether it's negligent, willful, or reckless, that maybe we need to match that with the public perception of crime by looking at levels of crime and in regards to sentencing. And so Senator Huff and again, other members again agreed that we should vote on and consider extending the task force, that we should indeed create default mens rea, that we should specifically work on assault, and provide resources, potentially talk about how we can get some more resources for the work that we're doing over the next year. Yeah, that's it. And essentially that what we need to do over the next year is to really create a kind of roadmap and guide for our discussions that may continue during the legislative session and certainly into the next years. So Jamie, if you wouldn't mind, if we could again review the specific agenda topics, because for some reason they disappeared from my screen, because I do believe I hit everything.
Sure. Like you said, in your summary of the last meeting is, I think, the item that you just hit. As far as new business, there's a letter that you should have received from me last night. That's a letter from Senator Washington on behalf of the task force, as well as draft legislation that would extend the task force by a term of 1 year.
So could I get a motion to approve the letter and then we can discuss it?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we want to approve the letter before we discuss it. I just wanted to see if we could have just a teeny bit of discussion before approving it.
Oh, right. You just need a motion to approve. Well, you need a motion to approve and then we discuss it. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, then I'll move to approve the letter.
And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. Now we can, yes, discuss it.
First of all, Madam Chair, thank you so much for your extraordinary work chairing this task force and bringing us together under very difficult circumstances. I've really appreciated the opportunity to participate in all the presentations by all the presenters. I see Dr. Soule and Professor Jaros there, and it's been a delight working with all of you. I love the letter. The Attorney General supports extending the task force's longevity by a year. We also support the vast majority of the bullet points. I just wanted to caution that because some environmental crimes have a sort of a more strict liability aspect than, say, for instance, a violent crime, that it might make sense to cabin a bit the language in number 2, the second bullet point. And instead of saying the General Assembly should adopt a standard crime classification system and a default mens rea, should consider a default mens rea. And with that slight modification, our office is perfectly content to support the letter in its entirety.
Would the committee support those amendments to the letter? I guess we just raise your hand. Yes, yes, great. It looks by body consensus. Any objection to consensus on that? Great. Thank you. Do you have that revision, Jamie? You'll add that.
I'll go ahead and touch base with Hannibal just to make sure I've got the language correct.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like
Yes.
Professor Jaros, sorry. I wanted to let you know, Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
I would second what Hannibal said, and just sort of bring to the attention of the task force that I think one of the things we'll want to consider when we consider that default mens rea is the question of whether or not it will be retroactive versus forward-looking to future legislation, because I think that makes a big difference on whether or not it changes existing protections and existing laws, or it sets a standard for the future that the General Assembly will sort of have aware as they pass future legislation. So it's something I think is worth thinking about.
Great. Other feedback on the bullet points, any aspect of the bit of the letter, if there's any uneasiness? Yes, David.
I don't think it requires a change in the letter, but just to clarify that when we're looking at this question of adopting a standard crime classification system, that includes an evaluation of what are the appropriate penalties associated with those crime classifications. And we had talked certainly about looking at issues related to other kinds of penalties, including violations and fines. And so I'm curious as to whether we're narrowing the scope of what we're working on, or if that's included in all of that.
Jamie, what's your interpretation there? Feedback.
Sorry, Professor, could you repeat the question or the point?
So as I understood the original legislation, one of the things we are considering is the appropriateness of the current penalty system as it exists now, whether or not the system is too punitive, whether or not both fines and jail time is it what is appropriate. So in understanding that we're adopting a crime classification system, some of that is inherent in that process, which is when you adopt a crime classification system, what you're saying is, well, we're going to have B felonies, and B felonies are associated with a certain sentencing range. And so understanding that, are we continuing to sort of have as an element of what we're doing an evaluation of penalties broadly, of what should be a violation? I think that is part of the crime classification system. And are we looking at fines and collateral consequences? Because I believe that was part of the original legislation.
Yeah. And
Uh,
are you able to make recommendations on a language change similar to what Hannibal did to make that more clear? Or just if you're able to do that, I don't think it changes the substance because the original intent of, all we're doing is extending the work that we've been doing. So we don't want to draft a letter that is narrowing it.
And since this is a list of the recommendations,
Yeah.
I don't think it does. So I really was asking more to clarify than anything else. The fact that we are making recommendations, I don't think limits our intent to evaluate the penalties associated with all these classifications. So as I think about it, I don't know it requires a change. I just wanted to flag whether or not we were in fact changing our agenda.
And again, further clarify as counsel, Jamie, if you're able to, or if you need to, but what we're doing, this is a letter. And so it's sort of short of recommendations because of COVID, because we were unable to meet, and just a number of factors. We are informing the leadership of the standing committees that it's our recommendation that we would like to extend the work. So we're sort of short a recommendation. And even though they are recommendations, they're not, don't have as full a weight, I suppose.
Yeah.
Jamie, is that right? Or should we further clarify?
Well, it cut out there for a second. They don't have, I missed just the
I
last.
was just saying, so these recommendations here that we're putting at the end of the letter,
Right.
are they, yes, do they have the power to actually, they don't have, because they're simply recommendations, they don't change the intent of the original bill or it doesn't change.
No. Right, you're absolutely right. So the mandate from the General Assembly is still as it was in the bill that originally passed. What the recommendations are essentially saying is that the task force has just agreed that that these are things that the General Assembly should take up. And I think in some ways, I sort of read that as the task force fulfilling its mandate to make recommendations on those subjects. But that's, I guess it's for the task force to decide whether or not, those things are what the General Assembly should be doing or should consider. I think the next step is probably whether the task force wants to make specific recommendations about those things. So, for example, working with Professor Jaros and others on the task force to actually fine tune that and say what the classification system should be or what the default mens rea should be. But that's completely within the purview of the task force.
Okay. Well, again, I think we have the intention to continue to have our conversations, to continue to do our work. And then with the expectation, I don't think it's unreasonable to imagine that we will be able to continue our formal work. If we focus, I guess I want to have the committee to focus on the recommendations part of the letter, and to Hannibal's point, or to, if you see anything in there that we don't, that we feel is either restrictive, or if there's an opportunity, if it's broad enough to just allow us to continue on. I don't think we'd have to wordsmith it too much. Is there any more discussion on the motion to adopt the letter, working with the Attorney General's office on looking at that other, the bullet point number 2? There's a difference between shall and may, so we're going to clarify should. Number 3, I guess I would ask Professor Jaros, is number 3 sufficient, or would we need to do a little more there?
Given that this is sort of signaling where the task force is going, I don't know that it requires a whole lot of wordsmithing. to some extent, we are redefining what it means to be a misdemeanor and a felony, but I think the language is fine here
Okay, great.
for what we're trying to accomplish.
Other members, delegate, are you have any readiness or any unreadiness to cast a vote? Need any clarification? Oh, hello, Delegate Cox. I'm glad you joined. Good to see. Okay.
Hi there, everybody. Good morning, Senator Washington, Chair, and
Great.
members. I was in the other committee and lost track of the time. Then I saw Delegate Shetty had left, and it reminded me where I should go. So
Yeah, I was in a committee as well, had to bounce and come over. Since I'm chairing, I thought it would be a good idea to start to be here. So we're just, there's a motion on the floor to approve the letter with a revision, changing from should to, may, or will continue. Wondered if you had any other revisions, or if you have a readiness to take a vote.
I so move.
Okay, we got this, it was seconded. All right, all those in favor of accepting the letter as revised, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nay?
Aye.
Great, 100%, excellent. All right, we have accomplished that. And also now I'd like you to actually take a look at the bill that where we're actually requesting for the extension. It's a very complicated piece of legislation.
Senator, to follow up on that, if there's
Yes.
an explanation that I can.
That's what I was going to give it to you now, Jamie.
So the legislation that I sent over, the draft legislation, would be introduced by Senator Washington by request of the task force. And essentially what it does is, to get into the nuts and bolts a little bit, it takes the original legislation, which was uncodified, and just modifies the reporting date and the termination date of the task force.
So if I could get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Great. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of extending the work of the task force and that this bill, and that it would be in fact introduced at the request of this task force, signify by saying aye.
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 Great. Any nays? Excellent. Okay, good. All right, is there any other business for the good of the whole? Okay, so we voted. All right, well, thank you all. That is the work of our task force. Thank you all so much. Again, under difficult circumstances, showing up, doing the work, doing the readings in between. I also always want to thank our staff. I thank everyone who's joining us on YouTube. We'll continue this important work. And so I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone.